Let's call the May 7th budget meeting to order at 5:30 or 5:35. All committee members are here. There's no public comments.
Motion to approve the agenda.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. So then we go to budget update. For the budget update.
Yeah, so the first agenda item, 23-24 budget update, just to share with the committee. By Wisconsin law, there is a formal budget update process that takes place during the month of June. So Allie and I will be working on that during this month. Later during the month, we will be bringing that formal process to the next committee meeting. So we are going to be asking at the end of the board meeting next week to schedule another committee meeting. We do have a little bit of a specific window of time that we're looking for, which we can share with you tonight. At that meeting, we'll bring forward the 2023-2024 budget revisions that we're requesting for consideration, and then we'll line them out. We get them for a variety of reasons. Grant changes is a common one. If a position has been approved is another common one, although this year we haven't really had that occur. But basically we'll bring those forward and then we'll get a chance to take a look at any of the changes that have taken place since October.
So then we go on to budget planning timeline.
Nellie's going to walk us through this.
Yeah, so we're right on track with the 24-25 budget planning process. We're ready to show you the first draft of the budget, which I can start to go over. The budget is balanced for 24-25 for the first draft. We're still in the same state budget cycle, which had the $0 increase for the per pupil categorical aid, and then also the $325 per student for the revenue limit. We do have the salary increase in there for CPI, which is at 4.12. And then we also have our teacher compensation systems, which are at 2% in the budget. We have a 0% increase in dental, and then we have included a 5% increase for health insurance and also a 5% increase for transportation costs. We have all of our capital maintenance projects from the referendum shown in Fund 49 in the budget. We also have 8.5 new FTE for next year, which are on page 13 of the document. That includes the positions that were approved last month from the memo, and then also the new teachers for the salaries or the schedule change over at the middle school. We also have our debt service showing the remaining debt that needs to be issued from our November 2022 referendum, which is about $66 million that still needs to be issued from the $175 million. We also have budget adjustments in there and revenue increases from the memo that we showed you last month, which included the high cost special ed aid changes to Fund 80 and then some adjustments with the flow through grant. Anything else has been put on hold at this time. But if there's any questions about the first draft, I'd love to answer them.
So Allie, with the high cost special ed aid, we put a quantifiable number into the budget for that.
Yeah.
But is that an aid just like transfer of service that we can continually add to if there are increases in expenses?
Yeah, so what is in there for high cost special ed aid is cost from 22-23 that we get a payment for in June of 24.
Okay.
So any costs in 23-24, we would get a payment for next June.
Okay.
So we can pretty much guarantee that the students we have with us this year will also be the same amount next
Right,
year,
right,
and then any
right.
students that move in as well.
Okay. I'll have a question later on in the budget.
It's a continual funding source as long as we continue to apply for it. But some of the costs, some of the things that we're purchasing within there have continual costs going forward. So claiming those funds will then help to address those. I think that's your question. Is that where you have kind of a continue?
It is, but I don't want to jump out of the agenda, so I'll come back.
Any other questions about the first draft?
If I could just add and mention, I see Brian, Brian was here before. Brian put together an HR committee meeting last week. The HR committee has recommendations going forward to the May board meeting that are lined up with the documents that Ally has prepared. The majority of our expenditures are salary and benefits. And the HR committee evaluated information from Brian regarding CPI, compensation systems for teachers as well as support staff. The total of what the HR committee is bringing forward to the May board meeting is slightly less than what we have in the budget right now. We estimated the 2% that Ally said for compensation systems. It's not quite at that level. When you get your board packet, you'll see the HR committee recommendations in there. I think it's something like 5.79 or something like that, if I remember correctly. So it's running a little bit under what we have estimated so far in the budget process. But what's unique about this particular year being an off-state budget year is we have full clarity when we bring the first draft of the budget on revenues and being able to line them up to expenditures. We won't be in this situation next year in May. You will hear us talking about a very different situation, but now this is the year that we do have a high degree of budget certainty, which is why the HR committee is comfortable moving forward recommendations for May. And that's why the first draft of the budget in May is a fairly complete document that has included everything that has been discussed to date with very, very few unknowns. The typical unknowns every year is like the student count. So, you know, Ally and I put together estimates and there's estimates in the document. But I would say we are able to say to the budget committee that, you know, 99% plus of what you see in here is no longer estimates. It's all according to the second year of the state budget, which is why we're in a different spot this May than we were a year ago.
Any other questions? Move on to student fees.
We would recommend a motion to move the first draft forward to the next, or to Monday's board meeting, please. So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Passed. So student fees.
So student fee updates are in there. The changes are highlighted in yellow. I did go in there this afternoon and add 2 additional changes that were not in there when the packet went out last Friday. Those included the middle school football fee going from $20 to $25. And then there was one under the high school section, which was solo and ensemble, which just got missed when I was updating the sheet, so. Any questions on these?
I can just bring up one piece, one of the things I believe will come up at Monday's board meeting, and it may be a piece for the second draft of the budget or for further discussion, but just as an FYI to this committee, it has been brought up to me by another board member, a couple other board members with regards to student fees as far as access to like student activities like sporting events. And is that something that the board would be open to a consideration in order to kind of advance participation and remove barriers for kids to go to those events, to just have that as part of being enrolled in the district? So that is something that I think has been put forth. I believe it'll be a conversation that will come up at the board meeting as we do fees. It's not one that I don't think we've done a real deep dive into, but see kind of what the interest is of the board, and then that could be something that's considered for a subsequent budget piece. certainly not something that needs to be made in the first draft, since that's really not applicable until we get to August. But I just want to put that on the table so that you're aware that that conversation may arise.
Question on that, is that something we would have to budget for in the form of budgeting for those fees? Or is it something that we would budget for in the form of some form of lost revenue?
I think it could be both. I mean, it could be something that you just determine that that's a lost revenue source. That's a piece I think we'd have to ask Nick if that was where he wanted, what that impact would be if he's able to pull that out. Or the second piece is, do you adjust another fee to be in accordance to kind of offset that? So do you put it in like a registration fee and you increase it by, let's just say arbitrarily by $5, and now everybody has kind of access to events. So that could certainly be a way to do it. So it could be either way done.
Is there a fee for the student ID?
Student ID?
Yeah,
No.
okay. If we're gonna talk about that, would it be possible to get info from Nick as to what the actual intake revenue is on student tickets?
Yeah, so Ally and I have been communicating with Nick once Randy shared with us that there was an interest in talking about that, and we've been asking for Nick to gather data. Or what kind of data can you gather? I mean, obviously, he has the student pass data that you can gather. What Ally and I don't know, because we don't use the system for, entrance to events, is we don't know if the single event can be tracked based on adult child, who was buying it.
Right.
But we reached out to find out. So as soon as we have that information, we'll bring it. But Nick is.
I know it came up at one of the listening sessions I always at. And I don't know if it's true, but according to one of the students, it's pretty much commonplace in the better conference that students don't have to pay within.
Yeah, we can
In order to
find
do
that
that
out.
kind of thing.
Yeah. I'm not sure if that's universal, but we'll definitely find that data out. It may not be something that we have for this meeting in May,
Right.
but it's certainly something that I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of it, so it wasn't a surprise as we're doing student fees here today. That is something we're looking at per request to kind of have that discussion.
The other thing I'll want to know is, where do those revenues go today? Like, how are those applied to the budget today?
Right.
And you don't have to answer that now, but that's one of the things I would wonder.
I can, basically, the decision that we've made in the recent past has been to turn over gate receipts to the athletic department. So the first two draws are the turf fields. And this is total gate receipts, not just students, it's the whole amount. The first two draws are Warrior Stadium and then Warrior Pitch. And then everything above that, as a result of the Title IX report, was turned over to the athletic department to use. And basically funding was increased for a variety of different expenditures based on the Title IX report. So that's what's currently being done with it. So if there is a reduction in gate receipts, we'd either have to provide additional district support, or as Randy said, add to the general student fee and then supplement it that way. So there's a couple of options.
Well, and there's a third option where you increase the amount adults have to pay to enter and have that cover the revenue of students.
Right.
Yeah.
And some of that gets set by the conference, I believe, too, where the conference has like a consistent amount that they're charging for gate receipts. So I think there's a few options. We still have some research to do on it, but just as an FYI to this committee that's coming.
Great. So just, is it, want to reduce the student fees so we get more participation? Is that, or is it because some students can't afford it?
I think it's all the above. Is that a barrier for kids wanting to go to a game that they have to pay, was it $4 to get in? Would that bring more participants, more students into the student section for some of our games? May it also be a barrier if you're going to look at it not just at high school, but all the way down through elementary? If you have 2, 3 kids, is that kind of a deterrent to take your kids to an event because of just the cost of it? So if you had kids that got in or students that got in as for free, who are residents here and they could use their ID or whatever to get in, then does that allow us to have greater participation and more students getting inactive in that too? So I think that's where it's grounded in. But we're gonna try to gather more data. I didn't mean to derail the conversation, but I thought you should at least know what's out there so that that's not a surprise, as I know that will come up and the response will most likely be at the mini meeting that we're looking at different options to bring forward.
You need a vote on that. I have a vote recommendation.
Looking for action on the student fees that we have presented here tonight.
Motion to approve the new student fees as presented.
Second,
All in favor?
I,
Aye.
Okay, facility use fees.
So Nick has went through and updated the facility rental fees, which is the first attachment in there. He also worked with Rick Braun to update the PAC fees. And then he worked with Christy Nacker to increase some of the pool fees to be more in line with the districts around us. So those are there if you want to bring any of them up.
yeah, could we bring up the facility rental? So my question is in terms of where they fall. Where do the team camps fit in? Are they under a category, a group 1, or are they under a group 2?
So you're talking like if you did a volleyball.
Like a volleyball camp, yeah. If we're gonna do a volleyball camp the first week of summer or something.
Is there, I mean, to be honest, I wouldn't have the answer to that. I'd have to ask Nick.
Okay, because I looked below and it wasn't clear to me. Group 1 is school sponsored, and I'm just wondering, are we assuming every camp hosted by one of our coaches is a school sponsored camp?
I think all of those are running their fees and funds through us at this point. So I think that they are looking at, my assertion is that they're probably treating them as group 1s, given that they're servicing all of our students.
Yeah, I appreciate you asking that, Mark. Excuse me. So in the new Booster Club handbook, we changed the accounting requirements for school-sponsored camps to be run through the district.
Okay.
In the past, it was optional, but in the handbook, we put, I believe it was September 1st of 23 was the deadline.
Okay.
That any camp that ran after that point in time had to be, if it was a school-sponsored camp,
Right.
that we were gonna manage their funds. So we know that as of that date, all of them were running through us. Some changed their practice last summer when we were encouraging the change. But as of September 1st, they all had to go through us. Now, what's not going through us, of course, are the for-profit camps, the regional camps that are using the facilities, which aren't group 2.
Okay.
Then, but generally speaking, we have a very good, clear definition now with our new handbook that the group 2, we're holding those funds now.
Okay. Want to be sure of that.
Yeah, so if you were to host your own camp for whatever sport, Mark, you're not part of the ones running through here,
Right.
then that's a rental of the facility.
And that'd be a fund for profit or not for
Yep.
profit.
Yep.
Right. Okay. And then the class 2 facilities, am I assuming those fees apply to that whole group there?
Yep.
Correct. Okay. Thank you.
One of the questions I've got is, we talked about, the village running their athletic programs, and, we've talked about, increased maintenance, cost, energy, things like that. And I guess it's my understanding that, we just let the village use our facilities for free. How do we at least cover our costs on those? I'm not looking to make a profit. And all of those are in group 1, right? And at the end of the day, I don't think the village is giving their programs away.
So that's a good question. If we could just pause that until we get to the data wrangler discussion, which is a little bit later on the agenda. Because that's something I just want to share with everyone about, depending if we go in that direction. The beginning of our having the ability to really truly identify what those costs are. But you're absolutely accurate in stating that that is a group, no charge, group one. Good example would be the basketball program on Saturdays at the middle school. The middle school is opened up for hours to be used for that program. Utilities are run, maintenance costs are run. We do have custodial staff there, which are charged to Fund 80. Fund 80 is the community service fund, but no funds are coming in. So it's directly hitting the taxpayer. So whenever, a facility like that is being used, there are expenses. Some of them are coded to Fund 80, and when that happens, the whole community pays for it through our Fund 80 community service tax levy.
Conversely, we don't pay anything for the tennis courts, do we?
The tennis courts.
I know we did some shared
Right,
maintenance.
we've participated in the capital costs
Right.
on the tennis courts. We've not participated in, let's say, annual costs like the lights, lighting the tennis courts. I mean, typically.
Resurfacing, I'm not talking about a total, but,
Right.
just a service.
Right, we've not paid for those.
Or
annual
nets or anything like
costs,
that.
right.
What about the golf course? Is there a fee for using the golf course for a team, or is that gratis from the community, from golf course?
So this year they're somewhere else, right? They're out at, the place, what's that called?
Yeah, they're at TPC. Yeah, they're out of Cherokee area. I believe there is a cost for that. I don't know how that runs,
Yeah,
Mark,
I'm not
but
sure.
yeah, but I think, yeah. But when you can't, let's, the tennis courts is a good example. We paid to obviously help build the tennis courts. They put the lights up. But the agreement was any of the annual maintenance of such and the equipment out there, that was on the village.
Right.
So I think part of what we've looked at is when we allow them to do whatever. It's kind of like we do with like BDL basketball is all Waunakee kids. So
Right.
we do open those pieces up. It's a similar type of thing what Steve's talked about, where we're servicing our community's children, the things that we do through the village center. It's a similar part with regard to some of that in Fund 80. And then what I think Jack's getting at is there's other costs associated
there are.
with that. And that's what Steve's kind of trying to
What
get to
Steve's talking about later.
at the next agenda.
I agree. It's, it is a community. And there are a good number of communities that fund their entire community recreation program through Fund 80.
They do.
Because it's the community's program. So it's exciting to see what's coming up, Steve.
Yeah.
All right, a motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second,
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Thanks.
So for Fund 10, we do have a new request from Lisa Johndell. She is requesting an additional bilingual or English language teacher for next school year. This is connected to new students enrolling. We have had some new students come in this year. That would push the numbers close to meeting a new teacher, and then also new students will be coming in next year that would require this position. She did attach on the materials.
I think we're already seeing new registrants for next year in our anticipation as we look at our trend line in that area over the last few summers, as we anticipate getting more students. So this is really, again, an item that we would ask to add the teacher at this point. So one, so we can get early into the hiring for it. And then two, this would also be then eligible for transfer of service costs.
So I know that's transfer of service, but we get that up front or after the fact.
So for this particular request, we get it up front. Ally and I have the ability to do them after the fact or up front. because we have the students that we know of already right now, and then even before, what's the date, somewhere in early November, or sorry, early September. We can submit for this fall. There is a window that you do miss it, so like if a group of students moves in on October 1st, and we missed it, we're then gonna have to do it after the fact, but okay.
Where does the transfer of service come from? Another district or?
Great question. So there is a process where the other district does get involved. The other district has to identify if they lost costs. If they do, then their revenues go down and in effect, they're shifted to us. If the other district is reporting that their costs did not go down, their revenues do not go down, but ours still goes up by an increase in our cost. So it's a checking process that the DPI does with the other district and then with us to really verify, did costs change in either district? Sometimes the other district has a loss in revenue, sometimes they don't. But either way, on our end, as long as we have the additional costs and the students were in those programs in their other district, we will see the increase in revenues.
And so if there's a market issue, we can exceed the cost that we've seen listed in here. Is that, I mean, that doesn't affect what you guys have to do.
Right, yeah, great question. So in the end, Allie is managing this for us and she puts in the actual people that we ended up hiring with their salary, the benefits that they chose. So for our district, the one that's adding the request, we are able to add for the full cost of whatever it ends up being. For the other district, it would be their costs unrelated to ours. In most cases, the other districts are not reporting loss of expenditures. And primarily we're doing that because they're saying, well, in our case, 2 kids from Madison, 1 kid from Middleton, 1 kid from Sun Prairie, somewhere up north, all of a sudden we have enough students for a teacher. But each of those districts are saying it was just 1 student that left out of 20 in a class, so they didn't have any savings, is typically the way it goes.
I would also say too, many of our students are from other countries, which automatically qualifies them for the transfer service.
Motion to approve.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
It passes. Let's keep moving.
So for Fund 27, there's 2 requests for positions, an additional high school special ed teacher, and then also an early childhood paraprofessional. Tiffany is looking to request these for the 24-25 school year, and these would also be eligible for high cost special ed aid.
I can just add something, Ally, before we get into any further discussion. I know particularly with regards to these positions, they are associated with individual kids. So I just want to be cognizant that we're in open session. This is part of the issue that I had updated the board in closed session about a few meetings ago. So as you're kind of looking at context, you can reference back to what we discussed there.
Looking at a variety of different options, and even if this is approved, like, I think we're gonna struggle to fill the position. I don't know that we will. If we are able to fill the position, then it would be come back to us through the high cost aid special ed, because it would be the one that goes through.
So I think you have 2 positions here. You have one for the
Yep, that was just
the early childhood kind of para, and
Yeah.
that's based on numbers and
Yeah.
needs.
Yep, the early childhood special education paraprofessional is because we have kids coming in from birth to 3. So we had a lot of kids come in last year and now we have more kids coming in this year. So we're just getting to the breaking point where we have to add a paraprofessional. It's a little bit tricky because early childhood kids, some are serviced in the early childhood classroom, some are served out in daycare sites, some are served just coming in an itinerant. So we kind of spreads our staff out thin because they're in a variety of different locations. But it would be covered through transfer of service because anytime a student comes in from birth to 3 and qualifies, we can claim transfer of service, even though it's not a different district, it's considered a different agency.
Our birth to three program also qualifies for the high cost special. Yeah, because of the small amount of students.
The early childhood one, yep.
So this was my question earlier. High cost of expense. Is this a new one so that we don't get it to next year, or how does this fit into this year's budget?
Yep, so my understanding is that we front the money essentially, and then we get a large percentage of that money back the following year. So it's essentially just like this year, when we claimed all of our students for last year that we're getting
This June.
this June, and so it'll be the same, so it is an ongoing.
But it's new money that's not in the budget that we will have to cover for the school year. That, I guess that's my question, correct?
What I would add to that, Mark, is because we learned so much about the high cost special ed aid this spring,
Right.
we're making a number of accounting changes before the end of this year. We're gonna be working with Tiffany in her office, and then we're also gonna be working with the payroll, and Jenny and employee benefits to move people around. So one of the things that we learned is as an example, if we have a student that's eligible for high cost aid, but we had their paraeducator in the federal flow-through grant, then that paraeducator was not eligible for the high-cost special ed aid program. So we're switching the people around.
Okay.
Now we have a really good understanding of how this works. So we expect that with our learning process from year one of doing this, we will see more high-cost special ed aid next year. We also will see more because the state's investing more in the program. Allie and I looked up the investment that is occurring through both years of the state budget. And in general, the state is prioritizing this program. So more money's going in. And we're also going to be claiming more next year. So Allie and I feel confident that we can take an increased approach to our expected revenues in that program next year between the accounting changes, the increased investment at the state level, and just the fact that we're aligning all of our federal and state resources accordingly. I mean, it was a deep dive that we took this spring. I think we know a lot more about this. I mean, we accomplished a lot this spring, but we're also setting it up to accomplish even more next spring. But ultimately, yes, if this position is added in and of itself, it would be the following spring where we get the full reimbursement back. But we believe strongly in all of the moves that we've made. This revenue source will continue to improve for us next year and then ultimately the year after. Because if this individual student need is not met by an internal staff member, it is likely that some external program would probably be looked at as an option. And those costs as well would end up in the same high cost special ed aid. It's just the cost would be significantly higher.
Thank you.
So what is this birth to three program? I guess those are
Not birth to three isn't our program, it's a county program. So it's a county program that serves students or children with special needs before they turn the age of 3. So once they turn, so the county agency does a referral to the school district because we're responsible for providing services once they turn 3. So prior to them turning 3, they do a referral to us. We determine if they qualify for services. If they qualify for services, then we start serving them on their 3rd birthday.
That's the early child program.
Yeah. Yeah. So early childhood is students ages 3, 4, and some are 5, depending on if they're in 4K or not.
Yeah, so the birth to 3 is a good predictor of what we're going to have for students coming in. So that's what we're being proactive with as we're placing students into that program.
Thank you. Any other comments, discussion? Can we,
Motion to approve both positions?
Second,
all in favor?
aye.
Aye.
Motion passed. You, plan 50?
So Steve and I met with Tasha Management in April. We went over the plan for the food service program for next year. The student fees were approved previously, and we did recommend that we keep the food service fees the same. The only increase was milk that went up, I think 10 cents it was. They have prepared a budget for us that shows an estimated positive balance at the end of next year of just over $15,000.
That profit is our profit, or is that okay?
Yeah, that
And
would
then
be
we set that aside for
for
capital expenses, or not capital, but maintenance and that sort of thing.
And it could be capital.
I mean,
expense.
yeah, right, it's,
So how is that fund going? Is it, where is it?
Sure. So Jack's question is, where is Fund 50? Coming out of COVID, we used all of our balance in Fund 50. We made the decision to have partnerships with both Taher and Lamer to keep individuals employed. So over the length of COVID, we drew down our fund balance. We have not built it back yet. We have been working since post-COVID to get the budget to be positive. Ally and I have spent a lot of time working on this with Taher, and we've seen significantly improved numbers this year. We are on track to actually have a positive balance this year, depending on how the rest of the year remains. And so we've seen very positive changes. This budget proposal fundamentally keeps the majority of the fees the same. The thought behind that was the board did approve an increase last year to cover the additional costs of inflation of food. Food costs, at least in our budget planning, are manageable with the fees that the board approved last year. So we thought at this point, let's keep the fees the same for our families and have a small positive balance as a goal.
Any other questions, comments? Approval?
motion to approve.
Second,
All in favor?
Aye.
aye.
Aye. It passes. To review of Fund 80.
Sure. So I'll start with the facility committee part for a minute because that was discussed this morning. So the facility committee met this morning. A couple of months ago, John Kramer and his team brought a request to the facility committee to change out the utility meters in all of the buildings to switch to a model called Schneider, which would then have reported power outages 24/7 to the maintenance crew. Prior to that, we have been finding out the hard way when the power is cut to a building. Now we would have basically full monitoring of all of our buildings, year round. The facility committee did approve that request. After that approval, Ally and I learned of a new technology called Data Wrangler that's being used in both businesses and public sector. The public sector use is more aligned with accounting funds and really tracking utility uses across buildings. And so we asked John and the maintenance team to pause the work to switch out the meters to the company called Schneider Meters. Data Wrangler works with a different meter system called Dent. In order for us to be able to look at the subscription software that Data Wrangler operates, we needed to go back to the facility committee this morning and request, I think it was like $8,800 more to switch that project from Schneider meters to Dent meters. That was approved this morning or recommended from the committee this morning to go to the board next Monday. That sets the stage for our ability to purchase or subscribe to the Data Wrangler program. School districts are utilizing the Data Wrangler program for three main purposes. The first one is to use the software to identify the utility costs connected to the food service program. Ally and I would not recommend doing that right now. You just saw a food service budget that had a small margin of $15,000. If we were to charge utilities to the food service fund, it would then go negative. If there was a very strong interest in the board in going ahead and doing this, we would need to go back and take a second look at the food service fees that we just shared with you, because they'd have to be bumped up. Now, it could be done, but just know that Fund 50 is one of the main reasons why districts do this. And typically, a district might have a positive balance of like 50,000 and they want to charge utilities to Fund 50. The reason why districts do this is if the utility expenses are not charged to the general fund, Fund 10, that frees up educational dollars to move them to Fund 50, the food service fund, or Fund 80, the community use fund, community service fund, excuse me. So Data Wrangler can do Fund 50. The most attractive part of Data Wrangler to districts that have large community use of their buildings is the Fund 80 part. And so what Data Wrangler does as an example is like, it will be able to determine on a normal Monday in the summer at the high school, the field house, the expense is $200 to run it. It'll then be able to tell by looking at our facility use system, if the next day there's a group in there for 8 hours, it then has the ability to look at the difference and say, we spent $700 on Tuesday. We only spent $250 on Monday. That difference was that group. That difference was the group being in there, the air conditioning running, everything that was being done, lights on, and it can calculate the difference. Important to know that the DPI has accepted Data Wrangler and their accounting system as an approved expense in Fund 80. So districts like Kettle Moraine and Oconomowoc have gone through the vetting process with this product, with the DPI to get that approval. This product is giving school boards in different communities the data that they're looking for to be able to make decisions. Like Jack said earlier today, does the school board want to add a fee for an all-day for-profit group that's using the field house? Does the school board want to have a discussion with municipal partners for using a gym all day long? Or does the school board want to pass those costs along through the Fund 80 tax levy? This product gives us the software to know what's happening. The third part that I mentioned that districts are using this for is called on-demand charges. So whether you're a public school building or your home, a growing portion of your utility bill is called on demand. And we are all charged based on the greatest demand that our property might actually pull electrical service for. And so in a school building, if we hit a peak usage of electrical at 1 o'clock the first week in June, because the kitchen is on, the air is on, it's a hot day, all the students are in the building, that is our peak amount that is determined, and that's what the charge is going to be based on. This system also analyzes your on-demand charge, and it does things like come and say, the data that's given to the district basically says, you need to pre-cool your school today. So if our normal temperature is 70, the system will say, cool your school down to 65 degrees at 6 a.m. so that you're not all grabbing that energy at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So it's designed to manage your electrical use and your load throughout the day by doing specific strategies that you just can't do without the data. So districts are using it for all three things. You do not have to purchase all three things. You can purchase one of the three or two of the three. And the other thing that Ally and I were gonna say, the meters that are going forward on Monday night give us the potential to do this. If the board wants to learn more, the representative for Data Wrangler lives in Middleton and offered to come, but we just knew the next agenda item was gonna take longer. And we're happy to have him come back to a future meeting. So I just wanted to give a quick overview. We could either table it and have a rep come back at the next month. We could talk about it now. We're just throwing it on the table as a new concept, but a lot of schools are looking at it right now.
Mark, two things. One, does it factor in our solar and geothermal capacities and how that interacts with our draw, or is that just something kind of separate?
Excellent question. They are rolling out a solar package. And why the solar package is so important is they're working with solar systems and battery, the ability for batteries to store the power coming off the solar system so that the power is released into the building at the time when the most demand exists to try to reduce the on-demand charges. Now, that's a brand new technology. And so that's something, there's only, I think, one other district they mentioned, I think, that's trialing that out. But absolutely, they are building a solar component to this.
I like to hear more about that.
Yeah, I think, so should we table it? And, have the, rep come in? Don, what do you think?
Oh, I was just gonna say that I'd want to hear more about whether the existing technology can also track the power coming in, because I would think that our peak pull down is the same amount of time or the same time of day that we'd be generating the most power. So.
Yep, absolutely. Ally and Alan reached back out. There isn't any sense of urgency with this one. The sense of urgency is the meters and making sure the right meters are there if and when we do decide to do this. So we will definitely plan on that for the next meeting.
Okay, so we've, tabled that. Next item.
Yes, so we were looking to bring the second draft of the budget to you guys in June. We were hoping to have the budget committee meet next on either May 28th, 29th, or 31st in the morning.
I'm good for any of those.
Can you repeat the days, please?
Yes, May 28th, 29th, or 31st.
We do have committees changing at the next board meeting. I know that we have, so.
So it's,
Maybe we want to wait till Monday, we can then schedule it, make sure we have the right people.
Yes.
Because I don't know offhand where those are.
Mhm.
Sounds good.
So why don't we just hold till Monday's meeting and then we'll know who the committee is.
okay. So we're holding on that, discussion action on proposals. Other, items for, discussion?
So we have two items in here that we wanted to begin the discussion with the budget committee on. The first one is the draft results of the community survey. So let's just talk a little bit about what that process is going to look like. So Randy, Ally, and I had an opportunity to review this draft report with school perceptions. School perceptions is still entering in data from mailed in or handwritten surveys. So we allowed people to mail them back as well if they wanted to from their home. So there are still some surveys trickling in. So please note this isn't final. They are scheduled to participate in the regular June board meeting with the final report. And they're going to join us and they're going to walk through the report to share what they're seeing and especially what they're seeing across the state. They can give the board a very wide perspective obviously what's happening in Waunakee, but statewide as well. So in the draft report, you will though start to see some of those major themes coming out, right? So we aren't intending tonight to go through slide by slide to show you the information, but there is some key slides we were hoping we could just have a few minutes of everybody's time and go over. Oh, thank you. So a couple of the most important things that we heard from school perceptions when Randy and Allie and I met with them. Number one, the response rate was fantastic. So this is not the response rate they receive everywhere. This is an excellent response rate, and they feel very, very good about our community's interest and participation in the survey. So you will hear that from them in June, that they're very pleased with the community's participation. In fact, the statistical margin of error is very low as a result of the high level of engagement and participation. So just one takeaway, they have a very high degree of statistical confidence with the data that's being presented to the board because of the responses. So that's just important to note. So I'll skip over some of the more specific stuff. You can always check out later. So on the financial end, there were the three different components that stacked together for the question at the end about would you support it or not. So the first one is really funding to maintain the current programs, the 8.1 million. And for all of the slides, you're going to see them prepare information on staff residents. So I would be an example, right? Staff member live in the community. Then they're going to give a breakdown of parent residents. So the number of parents in our community who participated. And then the next group is non-parent, non-staff residents. So you see all three of those for each of the question, but probably the most important slide that you're going to see for each of these is the weighted average. So we spent some time with them to make sure we had a really good understanding of the weighted average. So in our community, the most recent Census Bureau data that's available indicates that 70% of our Waunakee population is the non-parent, non-staff population. So in order for anyone doing a scientific study to really give you a degree of accuracy for what the data is showing you, they have to weight the groups accordingly. So the group that was the staff group, staff residents and parents are 30%. The group that is non-staff, non-parents is 70%. So as you're looking at the previous slides, you will see the support for the question varies according to the larger group. So kind of going back to this one, just to kind of show you how it works, you would see staff residents on the maintaining the 8.1 million being an 86% positive response. So then you go down and you would see parent residents, it drops to 67% support. But then you go to non-parent, non-staff residents, it drops further down to 51%. So what School Perceptions is sharing with us is you can't just assume, the 80% is telling you this is a real positive response, or even looking at 67% and saying this is a positive number. You have to look that the 51 is the majority of the people in your community. So they come to this slide here and they say 51% is weighted against the 70% of your population. The 67%, which is the parent residents, are being weighted against 30% of the population to come up with 55.8. So when I mentioned before that there was a very strong response to the survey, this is where school perceptions will tell the board next month they have a high degree of certainty that if a question was posed to the public for just the $8.1 million, that it would have a positive response between 52 and 57% in that range. That's what their statistical data is telling them. But then we go from there onto the other questions, and you will see that the support levels further drop. So when you get to the, I'm sorry, not on the hourly pay, that one doesn't further drop. The third one does. When you get into the second one, that is regarding the compensation for hourly employees. Excuse me. And now you see this slide, which says, would you support expanding the referendum to pay hourly employees more competitively with neighboring districts? You can see the responses on this one. Again, this is all residents, not broken down. Then they start breaking it down so that you can see, again, the support changes. The highest level of support is from staff residents to parent residents to non-parents, non-staff. Now, the important thing to note is the non-parent, non-staff group was more supportive of this question than they were of maintaining the 8.1. So this one does have strong support across the district when we ask this question. Then we basically get into the third component of this, which was really offsetting increasing costs. This is where you see the support dropping. When you look at this question again, you see all residents. But when you get into over here, the third component, the increasing cost, and when you see right here, the non-parent, non-staff population, the support for this question goes under 50% down to 42%. And again, keep in mind that's 70% of the voting population. So this survey result is telling us that this question is concerning to a number of the community members. Now, when you get into the question about the overall operational referendum support, this was the stacked question where you took each of the three components and added them together to then ask the public what their response was. Again, remember this one in the middle had the most positive response from the community. The maintaining the 8.1 million, second most positive response. The operational costs for inflation and really the gap between the expected gap between the state budget and inflation was the least popular. But when you ask the question about all three of them put together in the tax increase, you then would see, again, broken down by group, 82% for staff residents. Again, a little bit lower than what we saw before. You see 64% for parent residents. And then you see the referendum, the total referendum dropping to 44% for the largest segment of the community again. And then when you get down to the weighted average part, this is where you are sitting as a board. Basically, data telling you that with the question we pose to the community, within a 2% margin of error, it is a coin flip. So the statistical data would tell us that it is likely to fail at the 48 to 49%, or it could pass at the 51, 52% range, but it is right around that range. So those are really some of the high level takeaways on the financial. Some very, very positive responses from the community on the educational questions that we asked related to the superintendent transition. In fact, School Perceptions told us that this was some of the best data they've seen in the surveys that they're doing right now on the way the community is responding to the school district on the educational side. So you'll want to take a look at some of that data, but basically you're just seeing really, really positive data coming back on the first portion of the survey, which wasn't related to financial. As an example, as a comparing percentile in the 91st percentile with how our community is responding to the district delivering a high quality education. So you're seeing some very, very strong numbers coming back from the community on the way the community is feeling about the school district, the educational component. So they, the takeaway from School Perceptions is you're starting from a very positive situation with the way the community is engaging in the survey. But they did note that as we got further into the financial, the support started declining and more questions or comments were being brought up by people about taxes in general. And so that was a theme that came out during the survey. So we wanted to give you really that high level, what we just learned about earlier this week when we had a chance to talk to them. Know that in June, they're doing the final report for the entire board. But one of the takeaways that we really wanted to get from this committee is your thoughts regarding having Allie and I go back to our bond council, which is Quarles and Brady, and bring back other ideas for resolutions that are more aligned with the survey results. That would mean dropping some of the dollars, and that would mean focusing in on the financial questions that had more support and potentially moving away from the one that didn't. So when I say what that means, if I could just go back for a minute and show you. Rebecca, would you mind taking it back and going to the other attachment for a moment? So this one, please. Thank you. So at a very high level, Allie and I have been working with Quarles and Brady, the District Bond Council, to put together 3 examples of what referendum ballots could look like based on the 3 parts of the financial survey that we asked individuals. So there's a recurring option, there's a non-recurring option, and there's a hybrid option. But what we don't have in front of you for consideration is our options that perhaps would peel away part of the 3 questions based on the community response. Allie and I would have the ability to go back to Quarles and Brady and say, out of the 3 different things that we tested financially, 2 of the 3 had more of a positive response than the other. And we could put together examples for you for continuing the 8.1 million, seeking the $1 million for hourly staff, but not including the inflationary expense. That's definitely what the survey is telling us. But we do not have anything prepared to show you as far as what that might look like, because we just saw the draft results. So one of the questions we wanted to bounce off this committee is, do you think that's a worthy effort for us to go back to Quarles and Brady and bring more options that reduce the scope and the dollar amount? Randy, do you want to jump in at all? Or?
Yeah, I just think that's a key question for us right now. And whenever we put out a survey like this, I think the conversation we have around the table is you do have to listen to those results if we're going to ask, and we have over 2,000 people taking that. The results that are coming back certainly bring up concerns about the 3rd component of that, of how we've scripted it thus far. So I think being able to have something that would show you what that would look like. And I think it is very similar to what Steve says. Instead of the 12.1, it probably drops down to 9.1. You remove one part of the referendum effort. And I think that's worthy of a conversation in and of itself. But I think we have to start to articulate kind of what do those resolutions look like. The good part is you don't have a rush here. I mean, I think initially we had talked about if things were coming together in a certain way that we would have a resolution vote in June. You truly don't need to have that till August. So we're quite a ways ahead of the place where you need to be. So having some time to kind of look at this and think about it, you do have that in this situation. But from our perspective, looking at it, we feel that the survey is giving us indications that we have to present something differently than we initially posed and what we asked in the survey. But we'd also like to bring back to you something different that can show you what that looks like per our bond council and other partners that we have to give you a whole sense of what that picture looks like. So with that, we'd like to hear kind of your feedback on if you kind of see it the similar way or if you see it differently.
Mark, any input?
Go ahead, Dawn.
I was gonna say, yes, I would like to see where we're peeling back that third part. My question, not exactly tied, or thoughts not exactly tied to the question you just asked, would be, is there any way to phrase these questions that has some of the information we had in the questionnaire? So like pointing out that existing operational referendums are expiring. Do we need to rely on other communications to educate the district voters on that piece? Or is there any way to boil that into the question as well so that it's clear that the $8 million is something that had been expiring, that we just want to continue that?
Yeah, that step, Dawn, thanks for bringing that up. This was just a first attempt to find options for the language. We would expect that we'd have that back and forth dialogue to say, is this something we can include in the language or not? Generally speaking, we have a good dialogue with Quarles and Brady. There are things that they have the ability to include, things that they don't, but we would ask them that. Is that something we would do or could include in the question? Again, ultimately, depending on what components are selected by the board to be added together, recurring, non-recurring, and what that would look like. But we'll keep that in mind as we continue to move down that path as to whether that's something that could be included.
I mean, it would be great to be able to do it in both places. We also have to make sure that what we add into the language for the ballot is something that meets the standards that Quarles and Brady has for us. And then also then helps to articulate and be as clear as possible of what those questions are, because they can get very convoluted. But the communication documents and discussion around any referendums, this is absolutely going to have to be a leading indicator and a leading talking point in those discussions.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if maybe Annie has some ideas of, I mean, I just wouldn't want to rely on the referendum alone or the questionnaire alone on the education piece for the community, so that they understand what it is that they're voting for in this question and what it means. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there would definitely be, just as there's any other referendums we've had where there's obviously informational forums, there's mailings that we do, there's information that we'll create and put out on our website, on our social media. We can't be an advocate to say yes. We just can provide factual information, but it's very factual that we're in a place that says we have 2 referendums coming off and that these are critical pieces for us to bring forward for a third time. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think we've done a great job on previous referendums. I would suggest a couple things that it might be well for the community that we have school board representation at some of the forums, particularly with a new superintendent. I think that would be very helpful. And so I think maybe as a board, we will need to be a little bit more proactive versus relying on administration for a lot of those engagements. I like the idea of coming back with things. At the same time, if that's what we're going to do, I don't have to tell you, but I think we do need to start planning for how we address the inflationary challenges and start putting together a budgetary plan. We'll know more next, I'm gonna say a year from August, with the state budget, but we're gonna have to do something even before then, say, okay, how are we gonna adjust some of our spending in lieu of the inflation, because we know we're gonna be short, if we're not gonna go that route.
Yeah, what Mark is saying is that the third component was based on the best ability that Ally and I have right now to take the state budget estimated increase in revenues of 325, which is what the governor put into the veto. And looking at the most recent CPI data, we're able to start projecting the following year's CPI and identify what that gap would be. Now, it is hypothetical because we do not know that the state budget will provide 325. There could be an eventual deal that provides 425 to public schools. And special ed funding could go to 50%. We also don't know that CPI doesn't suddenly start going down, which is what the plan has been from the Federal Reserve, or remain sticky like it has been over the last couple of months. So it is simply an estimate, but you're right, Mark, if we move away from the third part, it then creates budget risk on the state budget side that may or may not end up being supported depending on where the state budget goes. As we were looking at the data, what's clear from the data is the third part, the inflationary part, puts the other parts that are supported at a higher level at great risk. Because when you combine all three of them together, it takes it all down to statistically, or with a margin of error, could be below 50%.
It doesn't mean you pull the whole thing out. I think that's a discussion you could have. Do you meet it in the middle? Do you reduce it in some level? There's other conversations I think that have to be forwarded with regards to that number. But right now it's $1.5 million over a couple of years. It's $3 million. Is that what you have? So I think that's some things that are up for discussion. I think that's why, I mean, at least from my seat, I think you utilize the time you have to make sure you make the best decision. As much as I think it would be great to have a decision in June, I also don't think that rushing that discussion based on you're going to get the final results from school perceptions in June, and then utilize your time this summer to make sure that you have yourself in a place where you're all comfortable.
Well, your point is right. We have to be responsive to what we've heard, and I know we've had some skeptics about how welcome we're going to be to whatever the results are, and the results are what the results are, right? And so I think this is the best path. You need a motion for that, or can we just?
No, I think we've got a general feel that you want us to at least look at some additional options. Yep.
Language.
We'll follow up with that, and then that'll be something that'll come back at a subsequent meeting and with the board.
Future agenda items. Anybody have any future agenda items? Hearing none, the meeting motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second,
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.